when you look into my resume, you may see, wow, that's a stellar resume with all these companies and so on. But I have to tell you, in 2016, I burnt out. It was a big burnout. My kids were 6 and 7 years old. They are 15 months apart. And because I had invested so much in my education, I wanted to continue working. But because the Latino mindset and the messages are like the mother stays at home and cares for her kids, I tried to do both. So I became a full-time mother and a full-time professional, and it didn't work well because I ended up putting myself last. Everything, my health and everything.
From the Grit Institute, this is the Grit Factor podcast. And I'm Shannon Huffman-Polson, former Apache helicopter pilot, speaker, and author of The Grit Factor, Courage, Resilience, and Leadership in the most male-dominated organization in the world. I'm also the founder of the Grit Institute, where I help purpose-driven leaders like you build grit and resilience and connect with purpose so that you can navigate transitions, overcome challenges, and lead with impact in your work for a better world.
Welcome back to the Grit Factor. Today's guest is someone whose story exemplifies grit, grace, and generational change. I'm honored to welcome Valeria Aloe, a powerhouse leader, award-winning author, and founder of the Rising Together movement. Valeria grew up on dirt streets in a small town in Argentina, where opportunity didn't come easily. From those humble beginnings, she built a global career in finance and brand strategy at companies like Procter Gamble, Citibank, and PwC across 7 countries. She is the award-winning author of Uncolonized Latinas, a book that has earned over a dozen national and international recognitions, and her newest book, Unbeatable Latinas, continues to elevate that mission by celebrating resilience and leadership forged through struggle. Valeria has received a number of business awards across New Jersey and across the United States, and today leads the global Rising Together movement, helping women reclaim their voice, redefine success on their terms, and rise together with purpose and power. I'm so grateful to have her on the show. Let's take off. All right. Well, Valeria, it's really wonderful to have you on the Grit Factor podcast. Thank you so much for making the time to join.
Thank you, Shannon, for having me. I'm extremely excited to be here today with you.
It's always a wonderful opportunity to have a chance to talk with you. You have such an amazing story and are doing such important work. I know it's going to resonate with people no matter what different group they're coming from and how it is that they're looking at the world. So I'd love to get into your story from your childhood, because you grew up in Argentina, yes?
Yes, in a very small rural town in Argentina, yes.
Well, tell me a little bit about what that was like. How small was it? What was it like going to school? How many kids in your family?
So a very small town, 2 hours south of Buenos Aires, but in a rural area. Roughly 20,000 people. So we only had one school. And in my class, we had only 40 students. So we knew each other very well. And in the streets, we knew people. Like, you were walking to school and you knew everybody on your way to school. That was usual, to be saying hello to neighbors and people on the streets. And then, interestingly, I grew up 4 blocks away from downtown, but my streets were unpaved. So dusty streets, right? And that, created an experience for me, because I used to be biking with my cousins. I have 2 brothers. I'm the only girl in the family, and it has been a life of being outdoors most of the time, really connected with nature and with people, with the community. That has been my childhood. It changed entirely when I became the first one to go to college in Buenos Aires. Completely,
How did that happen? How did you even consider it? Because for a lot of people, that isn't something that they would even think about if it's not part of their family experience.
Yeah, so it's interesting because my parents met in my hometown. My dad had to start working at 11 years old, so he didn't have the opportunity to go to high school. My mom attended high school, but that's everything that was available. And at some point I spoke to her and I said, did you have dreams of maybe going to college or studying something after high school? And she said, yes. She wanted to be a teacher at some point, but then she gave up her dreams because that was not available for her. And my dad wanted to be an accountant. but he could not even go to high school, So since I was very little, I remember they were telling me, you're going to, how they say in Argentina is be a professional, meaning you went to college, right? You're going to be a professional. You will go to college. So I made that as part of my nature. I didn't challenge that. It became part of my belief system. And something that I really honor about my parents is that they never questioned, how are we going to pay for this? They did not have the money to pay for that, but they always trusted that everything was going to work out. And that's something that as an adult, I look back and I'm like, I need to be more like them. My dad passed away very recently. And that's one of my memories from him is like, don't put roadblocks in front of you. Think about your vision and hold on to the vision, and the roadmap, the path will show. Because many times I want to control, right? We all want to. How is it going to work? What steps I need to take? And that's what I learned, the big vision and believing that that's for you. And then taking small steps and the path will show ahead of you. So that has been my experience with college. And I embrace that as part of a natural next step, I would say, in my life. I never pushed that away. I embraced it.
Well, I am sorry to hear about your father, but that is an incredible gift and what a wonderful legacy that he and your mother gave you.
Yes, definitely. Yes. I'm very blessed.
And not just the education, but the outlook, which we're going to talk more about because it's really important, especially to the communities that you're talking to, but I think really for all of us, especially at this time when things seem so chaotic. Yes. When you finally left and went to college, so it's a pretty big change to go from a very small rural community to Buenos Aires.
Definitely. I always say that in my town, we had more cows than human beings. I think that's right. But then when I moved to Buenos Aires, I'm going to confess, I did not even know how to cross the street with a traffic light because we have traffic lights. So my dad had to walk me to college the first week and teach me. So that's what we're talking about, so a big change. And I did not take it well. I didn't have the contact with nature that I used to have. But most importantly, I lost my sense of community. And that, I think, left a mark in me because since then, I became desperate to belong to a community. And as an immigrant in the US, that became even more important to me. So the belonging to a community and the importance as a human being to be part of and to feel that you have a group of people who resonate with you, who you can trust, who are part of your life is important. And when that disappears overnight, it is extremely scary. So that was my experience in the beginning. And what I did is I did what I was told to do by my Latino mindset, which is work hard. So that's what I did. I worked really hard. I graduated top 5% of the class with 2 degrees, one in accounting for my dad. I accomplished that dream for him. And then I went on to study marketing and brand management, business administration. So, but I worked really hard, and that's part of the Latino culture. Is your identity is tied to achievements beyond what your parents achieved. Is kind of, I'm not going to say it's a cultural mandate, but it's a cultural message that we grow up with, and it's a sense of pride for those parents and for us as kids. But also, it's a lot of pressure, as you can imagine. Huge pressure.
Huge pressure, for sure, especially when you're making such an incredible shift from a tiny town to an enormous city and to a university.
Yes.
What happened after this successful graduation? You've had quite a journey since then.
So during my time at college, I started to work because I was helping to pay for my education. And I saw this sign outside of my building that said Price Waterhouse is hiring. I had no idea what Price Waterhouse was, but I said, it called me. That sign called me. So I said, I'm going to apply to this. And I got accepted. I got an internship with them. And that was my first corporate experience while I was in college. So what happened naturally when I graduated is I was already in the corporate space, and I started to look for opportunities that helped me pivot from accounting, Price Waterhouse, to marketing. So I applied and then joined Procter Gamble when I was graduating at the end of college. And then when I was working at Procter Gamble, I met who is now my husband. And the friend of him said, you should consider an MBA in the US. And I said, what is an MBA? I have no idea what that is. And so he explained to us, it's a master's and whatever. And we started to get the information, and we applied to 5 schools in the US. And as you know, because you also attended that magnificent school, I attended the Tech School of Business at Dartmouth. And when somebody told me, wow, that's an Ivy League, I even said, what is an Ivy League? So that tells you about, the world is so different outside the US. Even the language. Yeah. The academic paths is so different. So I was accepted and I had no idea what an Ivy League was. And that's how I landed with my husband both to pursue our MBAs back in 2002.
Well, I mean, you didn't start out with small stuff with Price Waterhouse and with Procter and Gamble. Those are 2 of the most incredible companies you could possibly work for out of college.
Yeah, but I failed so many times because I went to so many interviews since I was very young. I was a freshman, and then all these senior students were there, and I was showing up to the same interviews. Some of them were group interviews, and I can tell you, I felt very embarrassed, but I learned from them. I was observing them. That has been a path. When you don't know what to do, a key is to observe what others are doing. And somehow you can differentiate. This works for me. This doesn't work for me. And that's how I learned through mistakes. And it took a lot of grit, right? And resilience to just, and forgiveness to myself to release the judgments and keep going, because that's essentially what you do. If you don't have that intergenerational knowledge within your family, you're in a trial and error type of situation. Yes, it's stressful. But then looking back, that's what I did. I observed other people and I followed, what works for them. I started imitating and copying a little bit.
Very, very good tip for anybody who is ever unsure of themselves, regardless of who they are and where they are. That's fantastic. And this you've mentioned this now a couple of times in a couple of references already, but you talk a lot about, and I think there's probably more than we could possibly cover in an hour on this topic, but you talk a lot about ancestral mindsets and overcoming those. I imagine maybe owning some of them, but talk a little bit about that and how it is that you teased that out as something that was particularly important to discuss, and how that has been either an obstacle or an opportunity or both in your life.
So when you look into my resume, you may see, wow, that's a stellar resume with all these companies and so on. But I have to tell you, in 2016, I burnt out. It was a big burnout. My kids were 6 and 7 years old. They are 15 months apart. And because I had invested so much in my education, I wanted to continue working. But because the Latino mindset and the messages are like the mother stays at home and cares for her kids, I tried to do both. So I became a full-time mother and a full-time professional, and it didn't work well because I ended up putting myself last. Everything, my health and everything. It didn't last. I mean, I think I have a lot of strength because my kids were 6 and 7 years old. I lasted 6 or 7 years doing that crazy thing about just putting everybody first. My boss, the projects, my kids, everything. And my health, my mental health, my physical health, my emotional health last by far. So in 2016, I burned out and I said, what happened here? Because even though I saw it coming in a way, your body starts sending signals of chronic stress. I disregarded all of that and it hit me really hard. But I became curious about what happened to me. If I was on a path to success, I thought, right? Couldn't see back then how unbalanced that was, trying to be everything for everybody. So with that burnout, I decided for the first time in my life to take 6 months off with no jobs, no job offer, nothing in the future, and to really rest. And during those 6 months, I also had a concussion. I went to the gym. I was hitting the head with 15 pounds. So talk about being stopped by life. I broke a foot. So I was in bed with my broken foot, a concussion, no job, and, burned out. So it was a trifecta of issues, but a clear signal that, Valeria, you have to stop. So when I learned that when you are not on your purpose or when you are pushing yourself in a very unbalanced way, eventually you're going to be stopped. So I became very curious about what happened. Why did that end? Why did I end up in this way? If I thought I was doing so well. And then after those 6 months, I started to do some exploration, a lot of work on my self-awareness, really go deep, reflecting and looking into who am I? What do I bring to the world? But also, how do I limit myself? What took me to sacrifice myself to succeed? Why? And go deep, deep, deep. On parallel to this inner exploration of what happened, I was asked to become a coach for small business owners by the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey. And because I had time, I said yes. And I did it. And there was this event for Latina women that I showed up to, and there was a bomb threat. And we all ran to the parking lot. We left our phones, our purses behind, but we brought the empanadas. So when,
You brought the empanadas.
yes. So I said, this is my people. Where were they all this time? I had been in the US for 15 years by now. Okay. It's been 15 years. Here's my community. And I felt something in my heart and I started to help. I ended up leading the entire incubator for small businesses. And as the director of that and working with so many Latinos, I started to see patterns of fear of asking for your market value, working too hard, not putting boundaries, putting your head down and working very hard, but not building your brand, not showing who you are, not building a network of mentors and sponsors. And I said, wow, I'm checking all these boxes too for myself. I see a parallel. And that's when I became very curious about there's something cultural, because if you look at me as a white Latina, and maybe you put me next to maybe an Afro-Latina, people may say these two women are from two entire different worlds. However, the cultural mindsets are very similar. The ways of thinking from the culture, and they can be extremely limiting in the US. So that's the beginning of all this research and the books and everything else and the speaking that came from burning out and becoming curious and connecting with people and becoming like finding all these, I'm checking all these same boxes. What I find that limits them is also affecting me. What can we do about this?
Wow. So even though you may come from very different backgrounds, there may be some of those same cultural issues that are getting in your way.
Yes. And also, if you look into the Latino community, that is now 20% of the US, trending to be 30% by 2050, is a very diverse community because you have people who speak perfect English or perfect Spanish, or they have an accent, or they were born here, they were born abroad. The skin color, we have a huge variety of racial compositions. So there is a huge variety, which is also a challenge because for companies, even for politicians who try to approach this community as a one size fits all, it doesn't work. It's even challenging for us, right? For Latinos, because sometimes some of us, like some people cannot believe that I'm Latina. Some other Latinos say, are you really Latina? Some ask me, where did you learn to speak Spanish as an American? And I say, I'm Argentinian also, I was born in Argentina. So there's that within the communities. It's quite complex, the sense of identity.
Wow. Wow. So this idea of an ancestral mindset, by this, you're talking about things that have been handed down really in spirit, in your mind, over the generations because of culture. Yes?
Exactly. Yes. And it has to do with your parents, your grandparents, and other figures of authority who from a very young age, not just express verbally certain messages, but embody and show those messages. So you can observe. So I observed my parents sacrifice themselves a lot. Like they were working very hard and not making any money. So for me, the message that I embraced from them was you have to sacrifice to bring food on the table. You really have to work hard. And there was this part of not enjoying what you do, even like it has to be hard. It has to be difficult, it cannot be enjoyable. And if it comes with joy and a lot of money, something's weird. It will not last. And then the thing about being respectful to authority, never challenge authority. That's risky. So imagine in the US when you're in a corporate meeting and you have an idea that is very different from what is discussed around the table. And you're shy about sharing that idea because you feel that you're challenging others. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be disrespectful with my boss or with this executive. And if I say this, that is different to what they are saying, I'm like being disrespectful. So that's very much in the unconscious, and it gets passed on. And I also had that experience with my kids, right? With my own children born in the US, passing down these messages of, don't speak up, don't speak out, just put your head down, work hard, get really good grades. And then I understood, well, there is also this part of you need to advocate for yourself. You need to build a relationship with your teachers. Like my relationship with my teachers were of silence. Essentially, I'm compliant and doing whatever they tell me, right? Working hard. My kids have a very different relationship. Here is like more of a partnership in the educational system, I find. So these are things that we still, and it's important to be aware because we still unconsciously pass them down, and from a young age. So they become part of your belief system. And what's even more interesting, in your unconscious. So they drive your decisions without you being completely aware of what's driving you. So if you're struggling with speaking up in meetings or having a hard time asking for a salary increase or putting yourself as a business owner out there in social media because you're feeling super uncomfortable. So there's right there at the root of all of this is a belief that is holding you back.
Yes. Yes. I have to say the first part of that work really hard, even if it's not fun, that also comes from the Puritan Midwest.
Yes. Yes.
Descendants from Germany and Scandinavia.
Yes.
That's my family.
Exactly.
But no, I can see some of the rest of that. I mean, all of us have these different pieces that come from our parents, our grandparents, from the cultures, from the part of the country or whatever different country we might have come from. How did you, when you talk about the diversity within the group of people that are Latina in the United States, which I think is really important and something probably that those who are not Latina don't think about a lot. What do you see as the challenge and the opportunities for businesses, or for anybody who is working in a space with people that would consider themselves Latina when there is that kind of diversity?
So the most important part of all of this is to bring a Latino or Latina to the table where decisions are made. Because right now, the Latino community, if you look at the potential, not just the future potential, but the current output in terms of contributions to the US economy is huge. So understanding the community, the nuances, needs another Latino who can navigate those complexities. And it's now a business case. Companies who do not have a Latino or Latina in the board or in the executive team are really missing out on understanding the nuances on how to capture this market, how to build loyalty in this market. And even though there are differences, there are some patterns that bring us together as Latinos. Yes, there are differences in language. Like sometimes you may say something in Spanish that resonates with the Mexican community, but will not resonate with South Americans, for instance. So it depends of where you are. Let's say that your company is located in several regions in the US. You will have to pay attention to the composition of the Latino market in that region, because it's not the same to look into Florida and it's like with New York. Two completely different worlds because of the influence of different countries, right? So it takes that, and there's a lot of data out there. So that's a blessing that we can look into facts and data and make decisions from that. But also having Latinos at the table who can just show this data and help others make the right decisions for businesses to thrive is extremely important. And we find that we are not represented. As we know, when you look into the numbers, where I believe is less than 5% of executive positions and less than 3% of board positions for a community that is 20% of the population. There is a gap.
So there's a lot of work to do.
Yes.
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 What was the moment that you knew that you needed to write Uncolonized Latinas? Was there a specific moment or experience where you decided, I need to sit down and do this writing. I need to do this work. I need to put this into the world?
There was a moment. Like, right? When you have a calling that is deep, 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 and is calling you. So when I started to find these patterns, I decided to do some Zoom weekly meetings because it was COVID and people were at home. And by the 7th session, open to anybody, I had like 40 to 50 people showing up consistently. And I started to share this information that I was researching, and I saw huge breakthroughs happening in that meeting. People who felt that resonated with them, people who got excited to learn, like finally somebody's putting into words what has been holding me back. And now I can see that it's not an issue with me. There's nothing wrong with me. It's my belief system that needs to be cleared up, the interference, right? So at that moment, I said, how can I get to more people with this message? And instantaneously, I thought about a book. I said, I have time, it's COVID. And I had that in my to-do list, not to-do, I want to say my wish list. For like 5 years, I had set the intention of one day I will write a book. So because I really believe that what's for you to do will show up in front of you, and it will be undeniable. So if you're looking for your purpose and you're like going crazy, why am I on earth? What am I supposed to be doing? What's my purpose? What's my mission? Just pay attention because the signs are there.
Pay attention. That is such important and good advice because that is so hard for so many people to do.
Yes. So you have the inner calling. There's the inner voice, but because of our fears, that's not who I am. I'm not a writer. How am I going to do this? I don't know who will help me through this process. I don't have the structure. The voice is internally, right? That inner voice that is calling you as a purpose gets drowned. But then there are external signs. Then it becomes louder. It's like, come on, write this book, right? So I was in Facebook, and there was this group that was called something like Latina Writers, whatever it was. And I said, I'm going to join this Facebook group because at some point I may learn something from this. And there was a comment that said, check out this program for first-time authors. I click on that link and it takes me to a program. I ended up signing up. I already had my one pager of what I wanted to write. So it was very easy. Boom. I uploaded that. I got into a call the next day and I got into a program a week later. So talk about things aligning, right? When you listen and you follow that inner guidance and the external signs. So that's exactly how that happened for the first book. It was the inner calling, and that link to me was like, it showed up at the perfect time. Perfect time.
Wow. That's fantastic. There's a lot of power in the phrase uncolonized.
Yes.
And talk a little bit about what that means to you today. How did you pick that? And how has your understanding of it shifted since the book came out?
So my book was going to be about a roadmap. I wanted to give people a roadmap to succeed in their professions, meaning understand your mindset, how that's blocking you, and what to do about it, right? What to do differently, how you can support yourself to do it differently. But then I connected with, I think it was 100 people over Zoom, interviewing them. And a lot of trauma showed up. And then I started to get curious, where is the trauma coming from? People feeling they don't belong, people having very hard childhood experiences, people like when they were young kids as Latinos in the US, the teachers were sitting them at the back of the room in their classrooms, and that sent them a message that you're not smart enough, you're not good enough. So also very eye-opening, these kids that were translators for their parents since they were very little, and they had to translate even dismissive comments that people made towards their immigrant parents. They had to translate that word by word. So imagine what it does to you as a kid, right? So the book became a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. And I said, where can I trace this trauma? Where is the beginning of all of this? And I said, let's start in the beginning when, the colonization of the Americas. And does it have something to do with it? So because I'm not a historian, I asked for help. I enrolled 4 PhDs that had expertise in Latino history. And I interviewed them and they suggested some books. And I started to get curious about why the US developed as the first world economy and the rest of the Americas is so far behind, right? So a lot of research and understanding, and really the colonization happened differently. The US is fascinating. The US was left alone in a way because the resources the mineral resources, the natural resources were mostly located south of Rio Grande. So that's where the colonization and the exploitation of these lands and the resources and of communities and people focused, right? While even there is even like a component of religion, right? The Catholic Church in Latin America mostly, but then the Mennonites and the Quakers here in the US, and a different mindset. Even the role of women in society was more advanced. So there were many components. But the root of the trauma and the feeling second class, feeling less than, even less than human, is the root is colonization and what happened back then with the human beings that inhabited these lands. And then we started to get all mixed, right? The indigenous, the Black community, the Europeans, but there's the DNA that gets passed through generations, that get the trauma gets also, there's like research that shows that trauma gets passed through generations. So that was a road. And when talking to my mentor in this program, through which I published my book, we were discussing titles. And I said, there is something about colonization. And he said, how about the uncolonized mindset? And I said, oh, interesting. I said, how about uncolonized Latinas? Which is about letting go of all the awful impact that colonization still has on our mindsets. Because I can tell you, Shannon, right now, that in the US, when I immigrated, even though I came to an Ivy League school, I froze in those classes because I felt I had nothing interesting to say, embarrassed of my accent, and feeling like a second-class citizen. I felt that way. It's not that anybody, made me feel that way. I was in that mindset of feeling inadequate, less than, not good enough, nothing important to say because this is a first world economy and they have everything figured out. So there's that, right? So that's the long story of why the name.
No, that I'm so grateful that you shared that. That is powerful and fascinating and disturbing and all of those things that are kind of packed into that. I have listened a little bit to a couple of podcasts. I haven't read much on this, but I imagine this was part of the research on epigenetics and how those things are passed down over generations mentally, right? In our minds and our spirits.
Yes, it is passed on, and then some genes are activated in some people, and that can, research shows that even some of our chronic diseases are traced to that trauma in our DNA. So it's so important to be aware and to heal and to take the time to really care for ourselves in all levels, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. That has to be our number one priority because that will keep us healthy. Number one, super important, right? Not activating this genetic that is so damaging. And also the more you take care of yourself, the more you have to give from the overflow and take care of others. It doesn't work. And I tell you because I burnt out. I did it wrong.
Yes.
I learned.
Yes, no, you know this, you've lived it. But I think what is hopeful about that is not only have you known it and lived it and become aware of it and studied it and are now sharing it, but that your work is incorporating science that shows us that epigenetics doesn't mean it's the end. It doesn't mean you're doomed. It means that you just have to recognize this, not that that's a small thing, and that you have to take care of yourself and work to overcome it because it can be reversed, right? It can be stopped.
Exactly.
Yes.
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 And that's powerful.
But it takes work that you've done, which is amazing. One of the things that I have heard from people in different communities, and this also is just counts for those of us who are women, is that sometimes when you do this hard work to overcome these limiting mindsets or these ancestral mindsets, you end up then being held back and resented by those around you who aren't doing that work. Sometimes that's even family. Sometimes that's even close friends, because it really is a lot of work. And unless you're in it, unless you've seen it, unless you've committed to it, there's this tendency to say, well, who do you think you are? Right. And what do you mean you're different from this? How did you experience that, or did you experience that? And how do you get past that?
If you've been asking yourself, what's the point of all of this? Not just in your job, but in your life, you're not alone. Most high achievers I work with aren't lacking drive. They're lacking direction that actually matters. That's why I built Leading with Purpose at the Grit Institute. It's a step-by-step path to reconnect with what drives you, leads you, and sustains you, especially when things get hard. If you're tired of just checking boxes and you're ready to lead with intention, go to thegritinstitute.com/purpose/ and start Leading with Purpose today.
Yes, I experienced that for myself and also for so many, most of the people I interviewed. I think there's something going on today historically that so many of us are the first ones to attempt or to enter spaces to try new things that were not available for our family members or that were available, but they didn't know how to maximize that. And all this consciousness work, the self-awareness, even therapy. Therapy used to be a bad word. And in some communities, and for some people in the Latino community, still is a bad word, right? So the more work we do on ourselves, I experience that as a sense of expansion. The world around me starts expanding. My own abilities expand. And I always try to put words behind this because I know the experience of what it feels like, but then I'm like, what is really happening here? And is that, your vibration? You know, I've been studying that as well, but I'm so mental coming from the corporate world that I need more. Show me more. So the way that I have seen this manifest is that we are tapping into some parts of us, some brain functions that may not be available unless you do some work that needs to be done first. And an easy example is if you show up in a meeting in fear, completely stressed out and focused on the stress that you have, you cannot even read the audience. You cannot reach them and influence them with a powerful message. On the contrary, if you're confident with a sense of expansion, connected to the people you're talking to and reading the audience, I experience both. When that happens, you really move them. You transform them. Whatever work you are doing or message you are delivering professionally, you can transform their thinking. You can influence them to make certain decisions, right? So there's power into that. So the way I put it is those who are willing to do the work, and many of us are the first ones in our family, will get the rewards of these expansive experiences and manifestations in our life. But then we need to be really compassionate with those in our family that didn't have the opportunities or were too afraid to take the opportunities. And I always say our parents, our teachers, our siblings have done and continue to do the best they can do based on the tools that they have or based on the tools that they embraced. And we need to be extremely compassionate because that's the only way that we will continue building those relationships, right? To have those relationships in our lives. It's on us, the ones who do the work on ourselves, to not judge, to accept and to have that compassion. So that's what I have found works, to really have that, you know, they are doing the best they can. We are also doing the best they can. We can, all of us.
Yes.
You know, to really embrace that.
That's really beautiful and such a deeply loving and profoundly important perspective on how to look at the world and to look at other people. I really appreciate that, both within the context that we're talking about, but also the broader context, which is increasingly, it seems, polarized and divisive.
Very divided, right? So something that I've
Yes.
been working on a lot, and a message that I always bring is unity in our diversity. How can we find unity? And I've been thinking about what's my role in that as a Latina immigrant who looks white. If I don't speak, people think that I was born in the US and my family has been here forever, right? I consider myself to be a bridge. So I had to really look into that. My many parts, many parts, right? But one part of me will relate with you. Another part of me will relate with another person. So how can we create more of that? The bridges, the unity, find that what we have in common. I think that's what we need today in this world. Not to focus on what's different, but what do we have in common that can bring us together? And because 99.9% of our DNA is identical, we have a lot in common.
Yes.
Yeah.
We do. We do have a lot in common. And it seems like there's such an incredible opportunity to, instead of celebrating our differences, which seems to be dividing us, celebrate the commonality and honor the differences. Yes?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, so you have taken this book and this work that you're doing in the world, which is just so incredibly thoughtful and so impactful, into something that you're calling the Rising Together movement. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Talk a little bit about the Rising Together movement and what you're finding really works in helping first generational professionals really step into their power, step into their purpose, step into the place that they're meant to contribute in the world.
So initially, the Rising Together movement, I thought about that as a way to unite the Latino community and help each other and rise. But then, very quickly, I started to realize the allies are an important part of the equation. And most recently, my work has stepped out of the Latino community to embrace everybody. So companies call me and they say, can you do this for everybody? Can we talk about confidence and mindset and all of these ancestral beliefs for everybody? Yes, we can. Naturally, the work trended towards that. And there is so much that you can find. I mean, what we said before, so much we have in common, right? So that's what Rising Together became, is like a message of no one can succeed by themselves. We all need those mentors, those sponsors, those allies, those communities that are different than us. And the more different they are, the richer the experience, because we learn from each other. So that's how that has, originally that was born with a theme or an idea, but it evolved naturally and organically into a place of inclusion. And that's beautiful for me to see when I do my work with a lot of diversity in the room, those aha moments when people look at the person next to them that physically may look very different. They may be from two different political parties, completely the opposite, whatever that is. And they start talking to each other in a very vulnerable way. And they find that they had so much in common they weren't aware of. It really creates a special culture within organizations. We need more of that.
We need so much more of that. And you've worked with some of the biggest companies in the world. You're continuing that work in a different sort of a way now. So when it comes to really honoring that diversity and creating this real inclusion where we're bringing everybody to the table, what are the conversations that we're still not having enough of, do you think?
I think that we're afraid of going to the uncomfortable. We're afraid of sharing what we struggle with. And I will give you a very particular example. Something that I have done is when I bring this information to companies and I lay out ways we hold ourselves back, I started to do anonymous surveys to get a sense of where the room is. And then when you do an open sharing, maybe one brave hand goes up. I would love for everybody to raise their hands and start sharing. I'm learning that I've been struggling with speaking up because I was influenced to believe. So I still believe that a part of us thinks that there's something wrong with us. So if we say that we struggle with something, we're going to ruin our careers. I'm not saying that you should raise your hand in a town hall and say, I struggle with this, but somehow you need to find a way within your organization or with mentors that may not be within your organization, but are good mentors for you to express what's holding you back. We need to not be ashamed about sharing what we struggle with, our barriers, because I have this sense, and I'm always, it's a little bit speaking of my own experience, the perfectionism, to show yourself as strong, to show that a leader is strong. A leader is not weak. A leader has no vulnerability, right? A leader has to be perfect in the words they say, with certain presence. The expectations are even maybe to be a robot, not human. Right?
Yes.
Who can be that perfect all the time? So I think it's the conversations about our struggles. Why? Because the more we share them in a safe space with people who can and want to help us, the more we will advance. So that's a conversation we need to have that is not happening.
Oh, Valeria, I think everybody needs you to come work with their companies. And maybe they're nonprofits and maybe any organization. It's really powerful. You have been a big advocate of both mentorship and sponsorship. And if you were advising a young leader, for example, what would you say is the key difference, and how do people know which one they need at a given moment?
So a mentor is somebody who will share their experience with you. So essentially they are trying to save you time and hurt. They're trying to guide you to what has worked for them based on their experience. A sponsor opens real opportunities, particularly if you're not in the room. For instance, they may recommend you for a promotion. They may recommend your name for a project. If you're a business owner, they may refer your business to work with some of their own network. So there is a component of social capital that the sponsor has built over time, credibility, and they essentially put that at risk, let's say, at risk to give you a chance. So they put their names out to people who trust them, saying that you have a value to offer. So it's different than the mentor. The mentor can be like your coach, somebody who guides you, your boss, your manager. But the sponsor is the one that opens you opportunities for you that are not available necessarily by just working hard. Now, I find that when it comes to building those relationships, the number one voice in our heads, tracing the root, going deep into tracing the root of what holds us back from building those relationships, is that a majority of people who don't pursue those mentors and sponsor relationships have an inner voice that tells them, you may be a bother. They are too busy for you. They are too senior for you. If you knock on that door, they may say no. Don't be a bother. And I think that it has to do with how some of us were raised as kids, that we didn't have a voice. At least in some of our families, we didn't have a voice. Like, kids don't know anything, or I find that in the Latino community, that's the case because of the authority that I mentioned before, respect to authority. So kids need to listen and not talk, right? So there is this message of don't bother me right now, right? That's real. So adults carry that in their head. So it's important that you listen to the voice that tells you, don't do it because they are too busy for you. They are too senior for you. You need more experience. You need to be more senior. You need this. You are not there yet. Listen to that voice and challenge that, because that's an area of opportunity that is huge in our professionals to break through the barrier and ask for 20 minutes of somebody's time. 20 minutes only. It's not that hard.
Yes. Yes. And it's okay if they say no or no right now, then that's okay too, exactly. Right? Not to take that as anybody who is a writer understands rejection quite well. And you just move on or come back later.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. Well, if you could sit down with every young Latino leader starting out or other leaders as well, what would be one truth that you would want them to take away?
I would say, whomever you were told that you are, is not true. So there is a lot of noise and interference that we need to clear up to find who we really are. And we're a lot more powerful than we were told that we are. That we're a lot more powerful and we're conditioned. So that's what I would say. Challenge, be a rebel. I love to say be a rebel. But this is not about going out in the world and creating chaos. Be a rebel with the inner voice that tells you that you're not good enough, that that's not for you, that people like you don't succeed. Be a rebel and challenge that voice, because there is a lot of noise in the channel and a lot of interference that we need to do the work to clear up.
Yes. Yes. That's excellent advice. Well, you have such a unique background, not just from your experience, but from your studies as well. Obviously, your Tuck MBA at the best business school in the country, but also in spiritual science. So how are you seeing your spiritual practice and those studies influence how you show up in your leadership work?
So when I burned out, I went deep into understanding why did this happen, but also who am I and what's my purpose? I felt I had a purpose, but I was not sure of what that was. A calling to do something in terms of service to humanity. but not sure what that was. So I started to read ancestral teachings, read a lot of books, went deep into that, then did my master's in spiritual sciences for 2 years, my doctorate. I'm graduating now in June, 3 years. And that has been not just a spiritual component, but also we worked on all levels, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And it's a journey of self-awareness. But if I can share something that is very valuable for the audience about how transformational that program was, it taught me that to create powerful and deep transformation, lasting transformation in your life, you can do it with micro steps. So you don't need to take a big jump outside your comfort zone and burn out, or face major rejection, or put yourself in a situation that may backfire. You can take a micro step. A small step outside your comfort zone. Those steps create small wins, and the small wins build your self-confidence. You start believing in who you are, and you start daring to go for more, right? So that has been the process. And the spiritual part of that, to me, is the understanding how I live it, experience that, is one day I really embraced that I am a soul having a human experience. And when I really embrace that I am a spiritual being having a human experience and not a human being having a small spiritual component. When I turn that around, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. I have to tell you, Shannon, my life, my way of seeing the world changed entirely. I wake up every day in an adventure. I'm here for the lesson. It's like, what am I going to learn today? And when challenges happen and difficult moments happen, because they do, I ask myself not why, but what for? What's the lesson here? What is this bringing me? Why? No, not the why, why is this happening to me? Like, oh no, I don't want this. No. What is this showing me? What can I learn from this? Right? So that's how I approach life. And that's one of the biggest gifts that experience in the last years gave me. The understanding that life is meant to be enjoyed, to not be a sacrifice or a torture, but a path of adventure, of meeting people, of being happy, of discovering who you are a bit more every day. So that's what it is. And it's all with micro steps. So don't wait for 2 hours to sit down and meditate. Do a breathing exercise for 1 minute. That's what I do to still take care of my family, my kids, my business, everything going on, even my dogs. I have a lot going on.
Yes.
And I have to take those micro steps. They do work. They change your habits. So that's what happened in that spiritual journey and how that manifested.
That is incredibly powerful. And I hope that every single person that listens to this will go back and listen again and write that down and then start to find a way to make that a reality in their own life. But I love that recognition that you are a spiritual being having a physical experience.
Exactly. And
that does change everything, doesn't it?
Yeah. And you know what's most interesting? That mostly in the corporate environments where I do my speaking engagements, we don't say the word soul. One day in Wall Street, I said self-love. And some people were looking like, wow, she said self-love. I mean, we're more open to that right now, but not so much. But then when I have one-on-one conversations with the same people who are sitting in the room, they are a lot more open to talking about compassion, self-love, feeling that they are more than a physical body, right? They talk about that in private. But in the open, and it's not about religion, right? We're not talking about religions because we understand that can be polarizing. And again, we talk about division, and it's about the essence of what being human means, our true essence that we all share, right? But to me, it's mind blowing that the conversations happen like behind the doors, like in private conversations, but not openly yet.
But also the way that you relate to another person at your office or to your boss or to the people that work for you or with you is going to be transformed by that understanding, isn't it?
Yes, because at some point you just don't fight with anybody. Is you embrace that you stop resisting. You stop resisting. And I notice this when I have my Q&As, right? I'm relaxed. When people ask me anything, the former Valeria wanted to have the right answer, wanted to know it all, wanted to be perfect, right? Now I let go of that. I'm like, let the question come. And that's something that I was sharing with my husband, right? Imagine if in these meetings, corporate meetings, professional meetings, we allow ourselves to receive the question without resistance and without mentalizing what we're going to be saying next. And we just relax and share from that space of expansion. It's really transformational. So there's something about bringing that trust in that deeper part of you that is not the mind. There is a deeper part of us, bringing that present into our meetings, into our relationships. It really transforms the way we relate with each other, the interactions and how we connect. I end up being friends with most of my clients, I have to say, like friends. Yes, it happens because something deep happens when we open up to having an experience that goes beyond the mind. The mind is amazing as a co-pilot,
Yes.
not to drive
As a
the car.
co-pilot. I like that.
Yes.
Not the pilot,
Yes.
co-pilot.
We need to direct the mind. We need to, our essence, that's, deeper part of ourselves that has to do with our inner wisdom, our consciousness has to direct the mind because the mind is naturally judgmental, limiting, puts people in boxes, has a bias. So it needs to be directed with consciousness,
Mm. It reminds me of the research for the Grit Factor when all of these, the wise senior leaders that I talked to were not interested in strategy and they weren't interested in tactics and they weren't interested in innovation and all of those kind of buzzwords around business or leadership, but they talked about the art and the science of active listening, which is in many regards what you're describing. And it's not easy for us to do that initially until you really do both micro steps and maybe some not so micro steps to really bring that into your awareness and into your practice.
Yes. And I find that breathing is major because when we tense up, we breathe very shallowly. But if we relax and start breathing deeply into our bellies, like that's a skill. I tell you, I have not been a public speaker all my life. I'm an introvert. I hated talking to more than 2 or 3 people at a time. And suddenly I'm in these rooms, in conference and so on. I have my techniques. And one of them is breathing. Breathing deeply is proven by research to calm down your nervous system. So it's such an easy thing. It's for free, number one. It's available to everybody who is alive. And no one notices. It's not that you need to be tapping or doing other techniques. You're just breathing deeply, sitting in a meeting. No one is noticing. That becomes your secret weapon to balance yourself, bring yourself present. So there are micro steps like that we can do to support our journey because we are all like at this point experimenting on how to break through all these limitations and the mind. We are aware sometimes, but we don't know. We're aware of our fears. We're aware of what's going on with us, but we don't know how to. So if there is one big how to get started with is breathe.
Breathe. Well, that is a simple and profound way to bring this wonderful conversation to an end, except for I'd love for you to tell us how you define success today.
Success to me is the freedom to choose what my deeper essence wants to pursue as my purpose. And that means I can choose where I work, who I work with. And I find satisfaction in working with people who are ready for transformation. It really fills my cup to see people transform themselves. And that's not everybody. So I also have to be discerning on who I work with, right? But that's to me, success is when you come to a point in your life that you have the freedom to choose what you really want to do or not do.
That's wonderful. Valeria, thank you. You're doing such wonderful work in this world that is so needed, not just in business, but in every sector and in every part of our lives and our work, both individually and communally. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and your time and your energy and your essence with all of us. What an extraordinary conversation with a truly remarkable woman. From the dirt roads of her small town in Argentina to the boardrooms of New York, and now to the hearts and minds of thousands, Valeria Aloe reminds us what's possible when purpose meets perseverance. And her Rising Together movement isn't just a tagline, it's her life's work. And her newest book, Unbeatable Latinas, is a tribute to every woman who's ever had to fight for belonging, not just to rise, but to bring others with her. If this episode stirred something in you, I hope you'll share it, leave a review, and rate the podcast as well. It helps others find it. And if you're looking for stories, tools, and truths to challenge and inspire you and those that you work with, Unbeatable Latinas belongs on your shelf. Until next time, continue to lead with purpose. Keep showing up with the grit factor. And remember that we rise stronger when we rise together.